Did you know there's a brand new law enacted July 1st of this year, 2026, that is going to affect you if you buy, sell, or own real estate? Hey guys, Mike Ferrante here, and I'm located in a little town just outside of Cleveland called Solon, which is one of the best suburbs in the state of Ohio, always in the top three for schools. And really enjoy working and living here. And of course, we're just outside Cleveland. We cover all of Northeast Ohio, all the way down to Central Ohio, where our team captain down there, Mike Pillow, resides in Howard/Apple Valley Lake. And so if you have a real estate need, please go to 21mike.com, click that button at the top, schedule an appointment with me or someone on the team. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube or whatever platform you're checking us out, hit the subscribe button, follow us, like us, and send me a message. Tell me what you are seeing in your real estate market and if you have a topic you want us to hit. Now, like I said in the opener, there is a brand new law, literally signed into law July 11th of this year, and it's called the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. And I know we hear all this news and it sounds like noise, like, oh, big deal, another law, it's not going to affect me. This one, I think, does have some stuff that's going to affect us. And what I've done today is I've summarized it just to give you a high level overview. Now, if anything piques your interest, do your own research and find out which part of it affects you the most. But here's the gist of it. This law was passed by the House and the Senate. They each had a different name for it and they combined it into one thing. But there were a couple of things they were trying to tackle. They were trying to tackle the shortage of housing in real estate. They were trying to help make changes to all the laws, the restrictions, preventing development, preventing new construction. Now, this was not a sweeping change. There's little tweaks here, and a lot of it is just pilot programs, grants, directives saying, hey, you guys should do this. Uh, so the other things that it did is it loosened some of the EPA stuff, which I have mixed feelings about, but hey, if it makes sense, we should be doing it, right? It created some funds. There's something called the Innovation Fund that I'll tell you about in a second. And it also changed some things that the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, does. And it changed some things in appraisals. So I think a lot of this is good stuff. How much of an effect will it have? I don't know. I'll give you my thoughts at the end. But real quick here, there were two laws that got pushed through the House and the Senate. The House had the Housing for the 21st Century Act, and the Senate had the Road to Housing Act. So they mashed the names together, and there's pages and pages of this thing, as you can imagine. But I'm going to summarize it for you today. Now, the headline, the thing that made the most news that I actually think might have the least effect on the housing market is this ban on institutional investors. Have you guys heard about this? It bars institutional investors from owning more than 350 single family homes. It bans them from buying more. Now, on the surface, you might say, oh, wow, that sounds great. All those investors that are gobbling up all those single family homes, keeping my buyers from being able to get homes. Well, that's a good thing, right? I think this is going to have minimal effect because the percentage that investors actually buy is pretty small. Now, it can't hurt. Okay. My feeling is it makes sense, unless you're one of these institutional investors. My other feeling, though, is that if you're one of these institutional investors, don't you think there's a workaround? Don't they just open a different company? Right? I see Scott nodding. I mean, they're gonna figure it out. If they want to keep buying, they're gonna keep buying. But I think the intent of the law was valid. And look, most investors, especially the people I work with, myself included, my biggest investor owns 150 properties, and that's a mix of singles, mostly singles, but also some duplexes, threeplexes, and maybe a small building here or there. But he's the biggest guy that I personally have. So on a day-to-day level, this doesn't affect me as an agent, as a broker with my buyers. I own 10, soon to be 8, because I have 2 that I'm selling. So your average investor owns 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 properties. So this means very little to them, except in their minds, they might say, well, great, less competition from the big guys. But how much of that competition was really coming from them? I don't think it's all that much. Now, there are exceptions. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but They're giving exceptions for homes specifically for the rental market, the build to rent or renovate to rent projects. So I don't know if you guys have this going on in your market. I'd be curious if you are. Drop it in the comments. Tell me where this is happening. But here in Cleveland, it's not because the cost of construction is too high and the ratios don't make sense. It costs you, say, 250 to 300,000 to build a house. Well, you're not renting that out for enough money to make it worthwhile in the areas you can afford to do that. But essentially, there are companies that are coming in. I have a client who's got a connection. They're looking at doing it here in Cleveland. So maybe I spoke too soon, but they are buying acreage, building a bunch of houses to rent them out, specifically to rent them out. Now, my guess is that this is happening more where the values of those properties are probably 400 to 500 grand. I'm just guessing here, but tell me if it's happening in your market. So there's exceptions to this where the institutional investors can still build to rent. Now, the next thing is trying to streamline the supply side because we've been saying all along, and I've been saying we're not going to build our way out of this inventory shortage. And what I mean by that is builders just can't build enough homes to satisfy that supply and demand disparity. Now, some of you might be in markets where we've already caught up. Maybe the demand has gone down enough to where the supply, you actually have a buyer's market, in other words. But in many markets, including Northeast Ohio, we still have a seller's market where there's not enough inventory. So one of the complaints from everyone who is experiencing this inventory shortage is that it's too hard to get projects approved. There's too many restrictions. The density of the housing is not enough. You're making us have a 1 acre lot, half-acre lot, whatever all those restrictions were. So they've tried to loosen up some of these restrictions on a federal level so that hopefully it trickles down to the local levels. Now, there's plenty of people, like I know, especially East Coast. I have a friend who's in Massachusetts. And she says, no way. I don't want that here. I don't want high density housing. I don't want vertical townhomes in places where we have single family homes. But to get to the nuts and bolts here, what they've done is they've sped up the EPA reviews, specifically the Act of 1970, which requires all this screening and permitting. So they've done some things to try to speed that up. They've also created a $200 million a year fund called the Innovation Fund. It's a grant program rewarding localities that streamline the permitting, adding density bonuses, or reforming zoning to produce more housing. So how do you get that money? I don't know. That's a great question for someone to answer and educate me about. But there's money available. They're trying to motivate, stimulate municipalities to make it easier for the builders to add density, get some developments going to help solve the inventory shortage. They've also done some reforms in manufactured housing. Okay, so that's your trailer home type thing. There's this outdated law about the permanent chassis requirement, which makes it harder to do manufactured housing. So if you're in a market where manufactured housing, your trailer home, is possible, you might have some relief where those things could actually come in, either be mobile homes or put them on a foundation. Okay, so for you guys who don't know, there's a difference between modular and manufactured, and people get it mixed up. They hear modular and they think, oh, trailer home. I'm not interested in that. Modular is simply built in a factory. Okay, it's a regular house, and instead of bringing the lumber out to the site, they build it in a factory in pieces. You've probably seen these things going down the road on a flatbed. They're in pieces, they bring a crane, and there's a professional set crew that actually picks the pieces up, sets it in place like pieces of a puzzle, and then as you can imagine, they have to finish the building where the pieces meet. So if it's a two-piece and it's a ranch, and they put them together like this, they have to finish the roof line. They have to do the siding. They have to make the electrical and plumbing connections inside. If it's being set on a basement, they have to connect the ductwork, the electrical, the plumbing, all that kind of stuff. But imagine how quickly that house goes up, and it's built in a factory. So the other thing you don't have are the weather related delays. So if you're in a market, I don't know, oh, like, hey, Cleveland, Akron, Central Ohio, maybe down in San Antonio, Scott doesn't have to deal with it as much, except you guys get hailstorms and sleet and still you get cold and rain. And so in a factory, you don't lose any days to weather. You ship it out on a truck, you set it on the foundation, bam, you've got a house. So they've loosened up some of those restrictions on the manufactured housing. My tangent about modular was just to explain the difference to you guys who maybe didn't understand it. Now let's talk about the financing and transaction changes. This is appraisals and the CFPB stuff. So there's one thing, like right now we're waiting a long time for for the appraisal, right? And part of it is that there's a shortage of appraisers. So they've loosened up the training. They made it more flexible for appraisers to get licensed. So they're trying to increase the supply of appraisers. Who knew? I had no idea we had a shortage of appraisers. I thought we were just, it was taking a long time because it was taking a long time. But there's also a Modernization Act, Appraisal Modernization Act, which requires lenders to have a formal documented process for letting buyers request a second appraisal or value consideration. Let me change this into layman's terms for you. How many of you have had an appraisal come in low and you felt helpless because there was no way to challenge it or get a second opinion? Drives me crazy because as local experts, I see an appraiser from an hour away and I'm like, how the heck can he have a stronger opinion, a better opinion than I have about this property? I know he or she is wrong. And yet when you try to get it challenged, you just fall flat because there's just no good process for it. Part of this law was to create a process for lenders to be required to have a formal documented process to let buyers challenge the appraisal. Now, obviously, as an agent or broker, we need to let our clients know if it's worthwhile. If the appraisal comes in low and we knew that was a strong possibility, then why bother? Okay, you've already hopefully accounted for that either with an appraisal gap or a conversation to know, hey, here's what happens if the appraisal comes in low. But in those cases where it comes in low and you don't think it's warranted, now we should have a process. So make sure to ask about that. Okay, and when you ask, you can reference, hey, I understand from Mike's training on Tuesdays that the 21st Century Road to Housing Act has an accommodation for a formal process to challenge an appraisal and get a second opinion. Because it's true, it's signed into law July 11th. Now, the next thing is the CFPB. Apparently, there's been some talk, and it's in the law, about easing the rules around smaller mortgages. Now, those of you whose median price range, I don't want to talk to you, 800 million, 1.5, go somewhere else for a second. But here in Cleveland, yes, we still have homes under 100,000. And there was a mortgage revision law restrictions that was meant to protect consumers from lenders gouging them. So essentially, what they did, this is Regulation Z, the whole last Housing Act reform. There was a law that said, okay, you lenders are not allowed to charge more than X percent of the loan because if you charge more than X percent, you're gouging the consumer. Now, what that did, everyone said, great, yay, no more predatory lending. But here's what that did. The unintended byproduct was that if I'm trying to get a $60,000 mortgage because I'm buying a $70,000 house, yes, they exist. Come to Cleveland, I'll show you. For $60,000, if a lender's only allowed to charge a percentage of $60,000, they will literally lose money on that loan between the appraisal and the costs and all the different processes they have. It costs them money to make a mortgage. They're paying their employees, they're paying the lenders. And if the lenders can lose money because they can't charge enough, they just don't make those loans. So who does that affect? It affects the buyers of low-priced houses. So I saw this and my eyes lit up. I said, finally, there's going to be a way that doesn't require a subsidy for lenders to be able to charge, hopefully, a fair amount for these low-priced loans. So that's part of this law. I wanted you guys to be aware of that because if you deal in markets like I do, where people are saying, "Well, I can't get a mortgage because I'm trying to get a $50,000 or $60,000 mortgage," ask your lenders. Say, "Hey, what is your minimum mortgage?" And a lot of them will tell you 75, 100,000 because of that Regulation Z law that I'm talking about, where they're only allowed to charge a percentage of the mortgage. So let me kind of put a bow on this. I'll tell you kind of big picture what it means for everybody. If you're an agent There might be less competition from cash buyers, but I don't think it's going to really come to fruition. I don't think those institutional buyers are really competing in your market as much as people think. Now, I wonder how it affects a buyer like Open Door. At any given time, how many homes does Open Door own? So I wonder how it affects them. That would be a great research project. Someone in the audience, go find that out. Find out how Open Door feels about this restriction of 350 homes, or if they're just making different LLCs or whatever, Open Door Ohio, Open Door Texas, etc. I'm kind of curious about that. So for agents, there could be less competition from institutional cash buyer investors. You might be able to challenge appraisals easier. You might be able to get appraisals faster now because you've been delayed on getting deals closed because you're waiting for the appraisal. You might see inventory increasing because of some of the streamlining process. So we can only cross our fingers and hope, right? Now, this is not going to be an overnight shift. So set the expectations of your clients accordingly. If you're a buyer, again, you might have less competition from buyers, but I don't know how much that's really going to be true. My understanding is that this competition is in certain segments of the market, the Southwest, for example. There might be a clearer path to getting your loans approved and challenge the appraisal. And if you're a seller, though, I wonder if you're not so happy about this. With institutional buyers limited, is that less competition for your home? I was kind of following what happened in Canada. So for years now, Canada has said, we're not letting people from outside of Canada buy our single family homes. They actually put a moratorium on outside investors from other countries buying their homes. It didn't really seem overall to have a huge effect on the housing market. I was kind of wondering if you would see prices drop in Canada, and they didn't. So I don't know that this change of the institutional investors is going to really affect sellers all that much. What it might do, though, these other changes might make it easier for buyers to buy their home, which is good news. So really, across the board, agents, buyers, sellers, I see all this as good news. And guys, if you know me, I'm not one who usually says, yay, the government passed an awesome law and it might actually help. But in this case, I think that it might. So, guys, do your own research. Hopefully, this was helpful to you. And we'll do more sessions coming up every single Tuesday. We're doing a little rebranding. You're going to see something about Mike and Mike. And so we might also have another Mike named Pillow from Central Ohio on more regularly. And we may put his ugly mug on video too. So you have that going for you. All right, guys, 21mike.com. Click that button at the top and please schedule an appointment with me and join us every Tuesday. You can join us live or watch the recording. Thanks for being here, everyone. I will hang out for a minute if anyone has questions or comments.